That's at ICC, here to analyze a game played in Team4545 League between ARuperez and Matusalen, and this was played in Team Event 57, Game 2 or Week 2, and it was elected as Game of the Week. And as usual, I make a video of the Game of the Week, and let's have a look. It's a pretty interesting game, and I have a lot to say about it. Okay, we got the Scandinavian defense, and it kind of takes on a lot of the characteristics of a Caro-Kann, which can happen in the normal mainline Caro-Kanns. The black d-pawn is exchanging for the white e-pawn, and as you can see with the basic pawn structure that we have here, it's not hard for black to set that up. Now, Queen d6 is a kind of peculiar move. For the most part, they'll play to a5, and it's been played before. I'm not going to go into the analysis of it, but it's certainly a way to get your opponent out of what he's accustomed to, and both sides just do what they're supposed to do and develop. And now black has set up the Caro-Kann formation, but usually the queen is a little misplaced on d6 in a Caro-Kann, so the bishop is better on that square. So at some point black's going to lose another time with moving that queen, and white just continues his development. Now, I'm not sure about playing bishop e3, if that's really the best idea here. This you're making it a tall pawn. It's overprotecting d4. It might be better for white just to develop his bishop, king bishop, and then get castled, and then figure out where to put this bishop. Maybe you'll find a better home for it. But unless white maybe is trying to castle queenside here. Anyway, let's move on. And if you're black, you have to be kind of comfortable here. You know, you're slightly behind in development, but you've just gotten rid of white's best bishop. But black has to, keep developing here, and he does. And then here white had the option of castling either wing, and he elected to go on the king side, which is fine. And black plays catch up. Now, one drawback against a Caro-Kann is it's so solid, and there's really no weaknesses in the position, that white can't really exploit it all that easily. So white starts redeploying his pieces to try to come up with a strategy here, and what black needs to do is finish his development, is get this bishop out and castle. And I mentioned earlier he needs to redeploy the queen, and there that's happened. Now it seems to me that this move by white just doesn't feel right. Okay, what's white trying to do? Stop knight g4? Maybe. Does it really matter if white plays knight or black plays knight g4? Well, only if this knight leaves and doesn't block this diagonal, because theoretically black might have some combinations on h2 trying to checkmate. But this just spends a tempo. White can afford it simply because black's behind in development, but at the same time one could argue that white should just continue with his plan and mobilize in the center. Maybe clearly moving the knight from c3 to e2 is the idea, to play c4 and get a little space, take d5 away from black. Black really didn't have any threats, unless white decides he doesn't want black playing knight g4 and doesn't want to part with this bishop. But let's just back it up for a second. I didn't really talk about it much because it's kind of a waste of time, but I just want to point it out for the sake of those people that do moves like this to preserve a bishop. Okay, the moment white played here, black could play knight g5, or rather knight g4, going after the bishop. Now, white either allows him to take it, or he moves it. Okay, or protects it by queen d2. But it's taking black some time to get this bishop, and that means development. Okay, his development suffering a little bit. Just in this line, e6. Now, white's pretty much, well, I don't know if he wants to play e6. He's shutting his bishop in probably has to play bishop f5 first, and then maybe white will play bishop c4 and then e6 and castle. And I'm just kind of, well, we got a pawn hanging here on c2 I wasn't paying attention to. See, I can't see one movers. Maybe white has to give this up, but I'm just saying black could do this earlier, and white wasn't preventing it earlier. White really doesn't get a whole lot. Get a little redeployment here, some time. White's up in development for the bishop pair, and that's about it. And let's see, I'm trying to castle for black there. There we go. Maybe white has something here. Well, maybe not. Knight f6. Looks like black's just about caught up, and white doesn't have anything tangible. So it's something black could have done earlier. He could have done it, and I won't analyze everything. Okay, makes the exchange. He could still do it here, and then the queen is already ready to retake. He doesn't. He could do it here, and he didn't. He could do it there, and he didn't. Now, why is white preventing it now? Well, white has the tempo to spare. White's got all of his minors out and castled. Black still has to develop his bishop and castle, so white can afford to spend the tempo, but maybe it's just better to go forward with what you want to do. Let him play here. Just let him take it. If that's what he wants, let him have it. Okay. All right. Fine. You've got it. Now maybe white's ready to break open the position with d5, and black has to step carefully here. If this e-file opens up, then this bishop becomes pinned at any point, and then maybe if you push by, you run into some possible trouble with a potential d6 at some point. This pawn is now passed. This pawn is kind of a target. White looks okay here. I mean, really, white doesn't have anything to fear about black going after the bishop. That's the point I want to make. It's often I'm so against these pawn to rook 3 moves that I see repeatedly in Team 45 League, where people play these moves just to keep something out of the knight 5 square using English descriptive notation, and usually there's nothing at all to fear. And this is just another example to show it. But anyway. White played, oops, let's get it right here. Now he played h3, right? Okay. And black develops, and black's almost caught up. And white decides to get off the open file. And lo and behold, black is actually ahead in development now. Both sides have developed all 3 minor pieces. Both sides have developed their queen. But black has a rook out on d8. Black's ahead in development now. It's almost surprising that this could happen. And there's going to be a turning point here in a moment. We'll see it. It's right here. And it's really odd. I mean, okay. By odd, I mean, okay, normally white doesn't want to play a move like this again at Caro-Kann. Okay? Normally he doesn't. There's several reasons. Number one, it gives you a backward pawn on the open file. Number two, it gives control of the d5 square, and this is an excellent square for black to have under his influence. If he can occupy, do a little transfer knight at the right time, knight f6 to d5 and knight d7 to f6, black's really looking good here. And the c5 pawn may even be a target if black ever forces e5 in. The pawn's kind of advanced. Maybe it's weak. But what's strange is white's actually able to get away with this move, and it seems that black's always trying to play catch up. It's just kind of a shocking development here at the moment. Black has actually gained a lead in development. White is able to play c5. So before we see the rest of the game, let's consider an alternative plan for black. Now, he had them. Now, one thing that kept coming up in the last Team 56, there were a number of games that N4 was annotating, and I would annotate them too, and I'd compare our notes. And we ran into a lot of similar structures like this. And in some cases I'd catch it, and sometimes I wouldn't. But an ideal for black to push in one of these type positions is C5 and E5. And I would often catch the C5 and then miss the E5 push. But I think if black does either one of those here, he's probably going to be okay. Let's take a quick look at both and see. Okay, on C5 there, the black is going to give white a 3-on-2 majority, but black's going to have some good squares for his pieces. He's going to have access to the C5 square because he's going to make an exchange. So if, for instance, if white completes his development, black can now you got to watch B5 here. But black should be okay here positionally. He's going to get maybe he plays here, maybe A6, maybe he just stops and puts the bishop here, and then answers a move like knight here with. He's got to be careful. He's going to lose castling privileges. Queen B6 takes, and here comes a check. So maybe the A6 move is needed, but black doesn't have to take on D4 right now. There's nothing making him take on D4. He can get castled here, and everything will be peachy keen. And if white takes on C5, that's just putting a black piece there that black wants to do, and black should be entirely and comfortably equal in this position, and it's going to take a mistake on his part to lose this game. So C5 definitely would have equalized. The other question is, what about E5? This can get a little trickier simply because the E file is opening up and black isn't castled. But there's a couple drawbacks here. These two critters are in the way, okay? So let's just take a look. White doesn't have to take, but if he does, boom, there's black's getting the C5 square back. He's getting his pieces mobilized. Now, note that this pawn is poison. White can take it, but I think he's going to run into trouble trying to save that bishop. I just don't see a way out. The threat is queen takes, which is a pretty serious threat in itself. And if a move like queen A4, it can be pinned. And what's white do? He doesn't. He's losing a piece. So if white tries to somehow open up the center to take advantage of the king position, he just can't get his pieces off the E file in time. He can't put the bishop on F4 or D4 to try to get that bishop off there because it's going to drop a piece. So E5 appears to equalize for black, and essentially when you're playing black, especially also in a Carcon, but when you're playing black, your goal is to equalize first, and then you try for the win. And as I note, by castling, black is suddenly one tempo up, and it just allows this anti-positional move, C5, which turns out to be a very good move for white. As we will see, black just is unable to do anything, and it's like I say, it's kind of remarkable. But in this position, black had a clear path to equality with either one of these moves. And I think one of the reasons he has that path to equality is that white spent this tempo moving H3, then he spent another tempo moving his queen back. But so black missed a chance to have an even game. But now let's shift our focus to what happened, and let's just see how this anti-positional move gives white all of this this play here, and black's just helpless. It's just surprising. Black might have considered putting the bishop. Well, you can't put it on F4. I'm sorry. Okay, but because white gets it. Now white's on this diagonal, and now that queen's in a little bit of trouble. Queen's got to get out of there. So it comes back to C8. So white's got a little bit of a concession here from black. Black's queen has one square to move to, and who wants to put it there, right? Well, you know, the idea is you let it sit there and get it into play later. Black's still eyeballing this ideal formation, but it's just fine play by white to just mess that all up. Here, if black parks the knight in there, then white may very well take it. Let's see what he does, and we'll come back. Okay, so here, I'm not saying it's any good, since black didn't play it here. Here white can get rid of it. Now this d5 square is gone. Now this still may be okay for black. It opens up the e file. White has more space on the queen side. Black's fumbling a little bit trying to get his pieces out. The only avenue is along these diagonals here and this file. Black's got to direct his attention this direction, and then it's white's move. So white may just park a rook here. Now it threatens the bishop. Where are you going to put the bishop? Do you want to guard it? Okay, well, we'll guard it. And this is just a sample line. We make developing moves to see what happens. Well, why not? Why not double up the stuff? Okay, this open file, let's double them up. And then black swings a knight over, and now there's a threat on the bishop. What do you do with it? It doesn't have a whole lot of scope now, does it? You know, putting it back on f8. Maybe white will pin this thing and threaten to create some double pawns. You know, like black can throw this in here, but oh no, he can't. D8's hanging. Okay, so this kind of spoils things for black a little bit. Maybe he has to bring the queen up, but then maybe the queen runs into some trouble here. You know, white definitely has a lot of activity for playing an anti-positional move like c5. So black had so much more equality had he not castled and elected to push either his c or e pawn. So anyway, let's go forward. Black doesn't put the knight on d5. Now white makes a threat on that pawn, creates a weakness on b6 for what it's worth. And now he pressures b7, but again, the black queen's happy to sit there for right now. Black starts trying to redeploy things. He's a little congested here. And white's doing the same. He's redeploying things. And you know, play just continues. Now white decides to liquidate. Now how are you going to take back? Well, you're going to take back with the bishop, so it's active. You know, now he gets in. He could get into d5. Maybe that's what he needs to do here. But again, it's not all that perfect. Even though this knight's nightly posted, white's doing a good job on this d6 square. White can play knight e4, and he's ready to plunk something down on d6. And d6 is a better square to have under control than d5 is. And you know, here black's got the knight doing the perfect job, blockading a backward pawn on the open file. But black can't really do a lot more with it. One drawback with this type of formation, you want to try to explain this the best way I can, so it makes sense. Okay, this is an ideal square for a black knight to be blockading, and the d4 pawn is a weakness. Now, if black's going to play this for a win, black wants to trade down to an ending and then use this weakness to decoy white, make white keep an eye on it. And the way to do that is that in the ending, say we reach a knight and pawn ending, the knight is not the piece you want blockading that pawn anymore. You want the king to blockade it. Well, you obviously can't get the king there in the middle game, and you don't want to. But just if you imagine all the pieces off the boards except for the knights and pawns, how does the black king get to d5? That's a good question. He doesn't directly, and one of the reasons he doesn't get there is because of the presence of the pawn on e6 and the pawn on c6. You know, those take away entry points into d5. So this is another reason why White is able to get away with giving this square to black simply because black is tied down. He can't do a lot of things later in this game that he would like to do because White's anti-positional chess is just taking it away. White's done the right thing here. It looks funny to put pawns on the cover of your bishop. It looks funny to give the d5 blockading square to black, but White's got the better position. It's just pure and simple. Much better than doing this, anti-positional as it is much better than allowing black to equalize with his c5 or e5. So let's get to the main line. Black retreats. He's just kind of swimming around a little bit. Now he gets into the squares. But then here I think White missed a chance to play knight e4. But, does black miss a move here? Maybe what black needs to do is chop this guy off right now. Boom, get it done with. How's White going to deal with this? He's got to recapture with the pawn or the knight. The queen. It might be better to take with the pawn. The idea here is you've got a new file you can operate on. You've got maybe potential to play c4 and maybe get a d5 in at the right time. White's going to have some maneuvering to do, but what's black doing in the meantime? Well, black's kind of suffocating a little bit. He's got to get some freedom for his pieces. One way is to get this bishop activated, let White trade it off, and then try to get the e5 break in. The game would have been about even, I think, if black had done that. But going this way just was the wrong thing. And now suddenly that knight becomes very strong. Now the threat is to put it on d6 and winning some material. So black deals with the best way he can, and now look at how things have changed in just a few moves. The backward pawn on d4 is no longer there. Black has control of d5, but black has control of d5, but White has control of d6, and the fact that there's no backward pawn to blockade anymore. Even though, as I pointed out, how does black get his king to d5 in the ending? The position is coming more and more into White's favor. White just has more boardroom, and who knows? Maybe black has some possibilities to sacrifice the idea of generating some kind of an attack against the white king. The knight can check, a set of rooks can exchange, and you can send the rook up, and chances are black has defenses, but White gets to do the creating here. White's trying to find a win, and black's stuck in defensive mode. And it's one thing to play an even game when you're everything is balanced and the position is tame. It's another thing to maintain equality when you're under pressure. And if you look at games played, say, between 2300 and 2100, the 2300 will always have a little pressure on, always threatening to do something, and eventually the 2100 might crack under it, miss a tactic, and then suddenly just get a bad game. But anyway, White's doing great here. It's all worked out. But black's kind of going into a passive formation here. But even though there's some possibilities on f6, d6 is just so inviting. And look at the black game. It's just cramped behind these three squares. That's his frontier. This is black's territory in this game. That's all he's got. I mean, the d5 square. So what? White has all kinds of room to maneuver here. Not to mention any potential pawn breaks. I mean, maybe White can play for a g5 pawn break since this pawn is h6, and force open some files on the king side. White's just got all the play here. This is handled so well. One thing I haven't talked about, that I usually like to talk about, is time elapsed, and both sides are taking their time. And I don't know if Queen B3 is the right idea. I mean, white can do some indirect attacking here. See, one drawback when you advance a pawn on in front of your castled king, if your opponent does a pawn storm, you're putting that pawn storm that much closer to offering exchanges. And white could probably do this since he has so much board room and get away with it. But anyway, white's just toying with white. He's got all the room here. He can do whatever he wants. Just slowly improve his position. And now white decides to give black some weaknesses on the queen side. There are two weak pawns, but black's at least got a little room to maneuver now. And reseizes the open file. And now complete domination of the D file. White's still doing fine. There's an attack on the C6. Overall it's a well played game. I mean, I think black did as well as he could. White maybe could have done better, but what white's doing is not bad either. He's just going into a favorable ending. I mean, boom, rook on the 7th rank. Black's these weak pawns, they haven't gone anywhere. They're still targets. White's in no hurry. He never did try my idea of a kingside attack, but I think black might have been helpless against that. Anyway, now white calculates he can go into rook ending. And boom, now pass pawn, big threat. A lot of times, sometimes that pawn can be a liability that far advanced, especially with the rook in front of it. But no, white just has such a spatial advantage that he's able to have his way here. And here you can see the king has to go back to f8. Now the rook's a little tied down. The next question is black threatening rook d8 to upset the apple cart. We'll watch what happens. He just comes back over here. He says, well, if you attack my my pawn on d6, I'll guard it by taking your pawn. So boom, there's no really no logical defense here. I mean, rook a6 just allows a mate. So now white's begged a pawn. He's got a pass pawn and going to have another pass pawn on the queen side here. The black majority on the king side means absolutely nothing. And here white decides to give up his pawn to make targets on the king side. So Black's got a strategically lost game now, ending. There's going to be a pass pawn when white decides to create it, and the rest of his kingside pawns are weak. So black tries to repeat the position, but white says no. And white's going to get his pass pawn. There it is. And black's got his rook active on the 7th rank, but it really doesn't matter. White can just do what he wants here, and that's what he does. And boom, fork a couple pawns. The threat is to play rook takes e6 with check, and then come back and hold on to g2. So white's just got his way. Let's run the pawn, and white's just winning. This is just a simple win. The king's going to escort that pawn through here in a minute, and there's just not much black can do. White's last move was designed to, it's like building a bridge where you want to stop the checks with a rook check. Thematic way to win, so that explains why black cuts him off, but white says, I'm getting in anyway, you just can't stop me. And at this point, black threw in the towel and acknowledged that white's going to win. It's really hopeless. Black will have to give up his rook to stop this pawn from promoting, and he just doesn't have enough counterplay with his remaining passed pawn. But it was a really good game. I mean, it almost seemed like castling. Let's just go back and talk about that again. We'll just get to the point where black castles. I was saying earlier at one point, if I didn't make it clear, I want to say it again. Often when you're playing black, your goal is to equalize first, and then try to do something. And then here you're saying, I don't expect you to play c5. Whoops. I don't expect you to play c5. And I'm up a tempo in, half a tempo in development. So if you develop your rook, well, I'm going to develop my other rook. And if you develop your rook, well, okay, even game. White really or black really won't have any kind of advantage there, but it's almost like he might think he might, simply because he actually got ahead in development. It got that gets a false sense of security, and maybe he does. Maybe. I mean, well, forget that. I'm saying black does have equality here, but his key is to play one of these moves, and that will get the job done. Now, one other thing on white can't do this because this opens up the file and this queen has walked into a pin. So I guess let's look at the culprit. Maybe time is a culprit here. Let's look at this. Queen c2. He castled. His clock went down almost 4 minutes, so he spent close to 5 minutes because his increment gets added on. He certainly could have considered e5 and c5, and if I'm playing black here, I wouldn't expect c5. It's just so anti-positional. But this is the kind of position that turns out white can get away with it, and good game by white. Now let's see. How long did white take on c5? He played it pretty quickly. Only 30-some seconds went off his clock and added the 45-second increment. So I got to give credit white for knowing what to do. But you know, you have high ratings like this, you can expect good chess, and that's what both players gave us. Okay. Thanks so much for your time for looking at this. Congratulations again. Both players can hold their heads high on this one. Thank you. Take care.